Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You are watching and listening to Historian Radio's Echoes of the News, and I am Muhammad Hussain Qazi, and these are today's headlines from the past. On this day, the 9th of November, in 1859, flogging was no longer permitted in the British Army, a significant moment in the history of the British Armed Forces. Continuing on this date, in 1922, on the 9th of November, the SS, or the Schutzwaffe, translating to Protection Squad, was formed in Germany. The SS would be one of Nazi Germany's, or the Third Reich's, most notorious forces, being largely responsible for political persecution and violence. The SS would go down in history as one of the most notorious groups to have ever been into existence in the history of not just the 20th century, but the world. And moving forward, in 1960, John Fitzgerald Kennedy was elected as the youngest president of the United States in 1960. On this day, the 9th of November 1960, beating then Richard Nixon, who would later on succeed him. Well, would not succeed him directly, he would succeed him after Lyndon B. Johnson. And this is a significant piece of information since very recently we have seen New York City elect its youngest mayor, Mr. Zohran Mamdani. And so his predecessor, not as the mayor of New York, but as a young political candidate elected to a seat of power in American politics, we commemorate John Fitzgerald Kennedy's electoral victory. Kennedy would also be a significant figure in the events of the Cold War, contributing a lot to the effort and development of peace with the Soviets. And lastly, in 1985, Moscow's Garry Kasparov became the world chess champion, beating Anatoly Karpov, who had held the crown for 10 years prior to that. A fascinating moment in the history of the sport that is chess. Now we move on to the next segment of our show, where we recount the famous births and deaths of famous figures from the 19th and 20th centuries and sometimes earlier. Born on this day in 1818 was Russian author and playwright Ivan Turgenev. Turgenev is best remembered for his play Father and Sons, amongst his other works, one of the icons of Russian literature. And following him in 1841, on this very day, King Edward VII was born. Edward VII was one of the most iconic monarchs of the English monarchy, having an entire era dedicated to him known as the Edwardian era. He would succeed Queen Victoria, who was one of the longest reigning monarchs in English history. And unfortunately, on this day, Nadia Alilieva, Stalin's wife, of the age of 30, died. It is long believed, or it has long been believed, that Nadia Alilieva's death was caused by suicide. That is to say, that Nadia Alilieva took her own life under unknown circumstances. And following the death of Nadia Alilieva, three of history's biggest leaders would pass away on the same date of at least 9th of November. On this day, two British Prime Ministers, Ramsay MacDonald and Neville Chamberlain, would pass away. Ramsay MacDonald would die in 1937 on the 9th of November, and Neville Chamberlain would pass away on the 9th of November 1940. Following their deaths in 1970, the President of France, Charles de Gaulle, the figurehead behind France's independence movement, or the French liberation movement during Nazi occupation, would pass away on this day in 1970. And on that note, we conclude today's headlines of the day. You are watching and listening to Historian Radio's Echoes of the News, and I am Muhammad Hussain Qazi, and these are today's headlines as history first heard them. Good night.